Welcome to the Journey of Self-Growth podcast, episode 8. I'm ThE, the host of this event, which was created so myself and others can share perspective on the concept of it in hopes that one another's journeys would be relatable, establishes awareness, and inspires listeners to adopt, then maintain such behavior. The definition of self-growth is a process of developing new skills, attitudes, actions, or reactions that can have a beneficial impact on your life and increases overall well-being. Tonight's featured guest is a dear friend of mine and a former coworker. Her name is Dezi. Hello, Dezi. How are you?
I'm well. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks for asking. What can you tell me about yourself?
I am a San Francisco Bay Area native. I spent majority of my years in the San Leandro, Oakland area. I have moved around a bit. I am a big outdoors girl. I love books. I probably own about 250 of them in my apartment at this moment. And I work in the HVAC industry. Before that, I spent a lot of years in the beauty and food industry. And oddly enough, the HVAC industry is probably my favorite thus far. So, I mean, that's pretty much all I have to say about myself. I'm not really good at listing off things about me.
I think what you said presently would suffice.
Yeah.
What would be your perspective on the concept of self-growth?
My perspective on the concept of self-growth, I feel it's to acknowledge areas that can be improved and improve them. You should definitely, I look at it as a chance of evolvement. And so you acknowledge where you can evolve, and you work out those areas until you hit a certain level of growth that even you don't recognize, but you're proud of.
The unrecognizable statement got me. So as a Leo, I'm quite curious to things that are I'm exposed to unexpectedly that I don't know much about. So I may be addressing that final part of your comment
Okay.
sooner than later. How are you currently growing?
Currently growing, I want to say since the beginning of this year, one of the biggest forms of growth that I've had is being more mindful of how I react to things that I can't control. One of which being people who treat me a certain way. If I feel like I shouldn't have been treated a certain way, I don't react obnoxiously. I don't go crazy. I don't sit for days and sulk about it. And it's simply because I cannot control how things are going to play out, but I can definitely control how I react to them. And so I've learned that choosing my battles, maintaining a level head through most of it, it's definitely been a more peaceful place for me in this world. So it's just keeping that peace of mind.
I'm glad to hear it. I'm glad that you are growing, as am I. So I wanted to go back to your statement when I asked the question, what would be your perspective on self-growth? And you said that it's a matter of evolving. I personally don't relate to the concept of evolving because maybe I don't know much about it. But in context to self-growth, how would you define evolving?
Evolving. Well, in the form that I'm speaking of it in, I mean, evolution is something that we've seen as over science in school. It's a transformation, right? You go from one thing into something else that is more functional. And it just keeps turning into something bigger and more functional than it was before. Now, in my situations, when I say evolvement, it has to do with my life compared to today. I would have never thought it can be as big as it is compared to what it was before. So
Mhm.
that's where I look at as my life and my attitude has been an evolvement, because I used to be a very just poor in so many ways and so many levels and areas of life. And today it's just not the same. I never thought 5 years ago that I can be sitting here in the state of mind that I'm in now. So that's my outlook on the word evolve.
I appreciate you elaborating. Um, would could evolution and the word changing be used interchangeably in your opinion?
Um, yes and no. Well, again, it's all in the context of the conversation. Now, speaking in how you and I are going on about it. So evolving and changing. I mean, I look at evolve as a positive, whereas changing can be either or, positive or negative.
Hmm.
So would I use it as the same thing in this conversation? Probably not.
Hmm. Okay, that's interesting. So it
Mhm.
seemed okay. Um, yeah, I didn't consider that maybe evolution is like a distinct form of change. Would that be how you are describing evolution in context to change?
Um, Repeat that question.
Because you said that for you, change could go in two paths. It could go either two
Mhm.
paths. It could you can change in terms of growth, or you can change in terms of diminishment. However, with evolution, it seems to be a distinct course, which would be change in terms of growth. Is that is that a fair assessment of what you how you were describing
Mhm.
evolution?
Yeah, I can say that's more of the area I was going to. Definitely evolution leading to being growth.
Mhm.
Hmm.
Okay. I'll definitely, keep that in mind, because when I think of evolution, I think of adaptation at times. Um, when I think about, like, animals, how the snow leopard is like a sub not a subspecies, but a relative of the cheetahs in Africa,
Hmm.
and still the same mammal, but since it migrated from an environment that was warmer into a climate that's colder, it had to adapt, which resulted in them appearing and uh, behaving in different ways. So for a long time, I thought adaptation and evolution were words that could be used interchangeably. Um,
Well, yeah, I agree. Sorry to cut you off. I definitely agree with adaptation
mhm,
being in agreement with evolution, because just like you said, it's kind of like saying how as humans we sometimes go into survival mode and we
mm,
have to adapt to a way of living in order to survive. And so again, back to me, you get out of that stage in life and you're in this brand new environment, and you don't have to deal with the same behaviors or have the same behaviors and attitudes that you did before. And so that is definitely, I adapted to my new now, and I just evolved into something bigger compared to what I was before. So
Okay.
I do think those are interchangeable.
Okay. All right. I appreciate that. Um, appreciate your perspective on evolution slash adaptation.
Yeah, those two I get, but change it. Someone can easily come up to you and say, "You changed," and it's a negative, you know? So that's a whole topic that we could have that one on the phone one day if you would like.
I mean, from my perspective, just having conversations with you, um, since we first met, which has been more than 5 years, I
Yeah,
think.
yeah,
Um, I think you have evolved. So then there was another section of your statement where you're saying, I think change, I think you were saying evolution sometimes you may not be aware of, even though it's currently happening. Is that what you
yeah.
said?
I believe it was along the lines of you'll evolve into an area into a place that's unrecognizable even to yourself. I think
Mm,
that's what we were on.
mhm,
Yeah, and so for me, when I say that, I tie everything into like a grind, I guess. When you work hard and your results that you're working hard for actually pop up, sometimes you don't recognize it because it's something completely opposite of what you had prior to starting that grind, right? And so being unrecognizable, one of the biggest things that I could say, this was before you came along, I think. I spent a lot of years being mad at people who had hurt me as a kid. And I was always just mad and just not feeling good enough and just always feeling down. And then one day after all this work that I have been doing on myself, still felt like I was going nowhere, by the way. But one day I think that work just paid off because I woke up and I was tired of being tired. Like I actually thought that to myself and was like, why am I like this? I'm just so tired of being mad. I'm so tired of being disappointed. And I'm just so tired of being tired of these feelings. And after that, I mean, that was something unrecognizable for me to wake up and tell myself to get over it and actually have a positive attitude that I just told myself to get over it because I let go of a lot of crap that day. Like
mm,
just by waking up after so many months of trying, and it just happened.
mm.
I don't know when it happened, but I know that morning for me was that starting point of something new and more positive.
I can relate to what you're saying, and I think I did have anger issues as a young adult,
Mhm.
um, and I think fortunately uh, I was aware enough to be exposed to signs that I feel like were that was guidance to me, to help me to refine my behavior,
Mhm.
um, be it conversations with someone about anger or simply reading a book that resonated with where I was in my life. Um, I wanted to ask you, were there um, resources, be it signs or uh, people giving advice that helped you on that day when you decided to relinquish um, these internalized behaviors?
No, I feel like I can't recall if there was because I wasn't really reading at the time. I mean, I don't know if you remember around the time where you met me, I was working like 7 days a week. I always had like 2, 3 jobs going on. And so I think around the time that happened for me, I can't say that there was anybody there giving me advice.
Hmm.
Um, but can't even say that I've read books. I mean, there was probably just me and myself really just sitting with myself, learning to appreciate my own company, learning to find good things about me, and learning to find things that it's okay to be happy for. And so I think it was just a bunch of self-realization
Hmm.
and a whole lot of finding myself. And I don't know how I figured out to do this, but I do think it just helped to spend time in my own company versus going out with friends every night who always wanted to go to environments and places that I never really cared to go, but I went because, it was my friends and I wanted to
Hmm.
be with my friends. So years of that, I think I was probably blocked
Hmm.
from finding myself and just realizing there was other things out there that could be meant for me and that could help me build that peace that I needed so much in my life because I had chaos everywhere else. So that was a long answer, but that's where I stand with that.
I appreciate your long answer because it helped me to have a sense of awareness of possibly what um inspired this change as someone like being a witness to what uh you were saying in terms of what you were going through. Um it's one of the key things that you said was you were saying that you were taking time to be with yourself, and it seems like solitude was a resource for you, um, because I think had you been choosing to participate in being in environments with individuals who are conducting themselves in ways that were counterproductive, um, that could have been distractive for you to refine yourself in a way that you could realize, like, I don't need to be angry anymore, especially if you're around people who are reflections of that behavior. Would solitude um be a possible resource in that time for you?
Yeah, we can definitely use that as the number one resource because it was the only time that I had space and privacy to do what I needed to do with myself. And to this day, I mean, I can't give any direct answers. People ask me all the time, the ones that know me, like, how did I do that? And it's just really, I don't know. It, it was something that I feel like I was probably meant to find. And it was placed right in front of me. And I took that advantage because there comes a time where you're just tired of being exhausted and you're either going to carry on with your exhaustion or you're not. And so I don't know, maybe I took a really long nap that day, but it, I can't even. Solitude, we're just going to say solitude was it.
Yes, I mean, I think for me, like, I value solitude,
Hmm.
um, because in solitude, it's like you're kind of like on an island. You don't have people um, giving you advice, or sharing their opinion about yourself. It's more of, like you said, self reflection, an enhancement of self awareness, because you're left to your own devices.
Hmm.
And for me, I value solitude because um, I think even when in like solitude, we're still connected to the universe. And the universe, for me, when I'm in solitude, it helps me to um, build a stronger relationship with it, because I don't have uh, a friend or family member as a resource. So I value solitude.
Me too.
um, so I do think, going back to your 200 plus books,
Yeah.
I do think books are helpful in self growth. Um, what would be one of your favorite books and why?
Any genre or
Any
just
genre?
okay. Well, I mean, any genre, everyone's going to judge me. It is a young adult book that read for the first time in high school. It's called Midnight Predator. I'm a big fantasy nerd. Um, anyways, Midnight Predator is about all my favorite things. There's werewolves, there's vampires, and it was one of the first books that I read 7 times in the same, like, within a 2-week period, maybe less. And I read it that often because it was such a enjoyable story for me, teenage me and adult me. I still think about it to this day. That I read it that many times hoping more would be added on to the ending, but instead, just realizing the author left me to make up my own ending. So, um, good
Mm,
book. That was my favorite one of all time. Now, if you count books that I've read over the last 2 years, because the company I work for, they actually provide a bunch of self-growth books for you that you're able to take whenever you want. That's when my self-help journey started too, with reading, should I say.
mhm.
Um, and my favorite one from them that I've read twice so far, it's a very easy read. It's called The Question Behind the Question.
Oh wow.
And so it's about personal accountability. And I tell people to read it because it's simple, it's very direct, and it's so direct that the author actually, this is his rewrite. So he already released the question behind the question once, and then he turned around and shortened it and simplified it into a smaller book to just tell people, like, here you go, let's practice this personal accountability. So I think that helped me a lot. So one of my favorite ones.
Okay. I'm gonna address both. The first
Mhm.
the first one, with the vampires and the werewolves, ha- why was that story relatable to you?
Um, it was relatable to me. I want to say because I was a dreamer, in a way, and at times I still am. But what I really liked about the story when I first read it is that it's about a girl who turned into a real badass chick. Like, she went through a lot, and the villains are in the story too. It starts off with her after she's evolved into who she is at the time the story is being told. And then you have flashbacks of what she's gone through and why this person she's trying to stay away from is how he caused her to have that downfall. And eventually she gets the chance to come across him again. And in so many words, she snatches her life back. She takes her dignity back. She takes everything back that he stole from her, and she walks out a better person than what she was, because although she did evolve at the beginning of the story, she was still holding on to a lot of hurt.
Mhm.
And so I guess back then I did have a very chaotic high school life.
Mhm.
And actually, I want to say middle school through high school and some of college, it was very loud, it was very chaotic. There was some certain situations going on to where I can look at myself today versus back then and say I pretty much did what she did. I took all of that stuff that I felt was stolen from me right back. Um, so I think that's why that story always stayed with me. And
Mhm.
I think it was relatable back then at an early age, just because of I had the fantasy of being able to not rebel, but to respond like that to anything that's ever tried to break me.
Wow, that's interesting. And did the vampires, the werewolves, were they like symbolic of like the antagonists that she had to endure during the story?
Um, no, I mean, it was just it was a vampire that made her life horrible, and
Hmm.
it was a shapeshifter actually who would go from he was able to shapeshift from a vampire human form into a jaguar.
Mm,
So it was him that showed her that not though he is similar to what this person was, he was better. Not everything, not everyone is the same. You have one interaction with somebody, it's not always going to be that way around, no matter how much they look alike or how much they seem to be alike. So that's how I would answer that question.
yeah, I appreciate that. And then
Mhm.
you said that she took her life back. What methods or strategies did she apply to overcome her adversities?
She just had, let's see, she was able to, there was an incident where she comes across the guy who basically, in so many words, killed her family in front of
Hmm.
her.
Mm,
And she went from being this badass chick to cowering back down in front of him. And she when she realized that he doesn't need to have this control over her anymore, she's been living a whole life without him putting this fear in her. And she just, I think she grasped onto that strength that she had found while she was away. And I think she realized that how she reacts during that moment is going to be it could be the outcome of
mhm,
the rest of her life. And so she can either sit there and stay down and take the kicks he was giving her and end up back in his possession, or she could fight back, which is what she did. And so I think her making that move is pretty much like what saved her, because had she not, I don't know where the story would have went. It probably would have depressed me.
Wow. You said sh I think you said she built strength. You used the term while she was away, meaning, do you mean she was away from him for a time and that helped her to build confidence?
Yeah, she did get the blessing of being bought by somebody else, and he helped her turn into more. And so he kept her away from that person or vampire, whatever we're calling him. And she kept away, and he just put her in a bunch of training, did a lot of mind work with her, not manipulation, but like letting her know, like, you don't, there's no reason for you to fear this person anymore. And so he kind of walked her through a whole life trauma, and he built her up mentally, he built her up emotionally, he built her up like in ways that I'm sure she didn't know she has. And I think she actually knows that too, because when she's describing her past self in the story, like in the flashbacks, you can see that she was just a very naive young girl, not really experienced in the world. So she grew up thinking life was just sweet and simple, if that makes any sense. And
Mhm.
she was hit with the harsh reality at a very young age. So,
Mm. I think ideally, I think we all would like to have a person in our lives that uh demonstrated what this individual did with her in terms of building her up. Um, but it seems like those situations I shouldn't expect, but I definitely hope for. And I think I'm fortunate enough to have established friendships with people who are supportive of me, similar to this character that you mentioned in the story.
Mhm.
Um, and I think coming full circle, I do admire your ability to sometimes not, like you said, not need to be amongst people in order to grow yourself. Um, and I think that that book, even though it's fictitious, is still is valuable. I think that all writings can be valuable because I believe in the holistic ideology,
Mhm.
which suggests that all things are related. Given given the dark aspects or light aspects of life, it all has its purpose. Are you are what's your perspective on like the holistic ideology?
I think it's we're very lucky to be in a time where it's all over the internet and we have easy access to it. When I was first introduced to anything holistic, I call my mom the flower child because she was involved with a lot of, we would call them hippies. You know, she was had a lot of friends who were from the islands, they were from Ireland, but they were all very more on the natural way of life than anything. So I was exposed to it very early on. So growing up, there was a lot of, it wasn't unusual for me to go the holistic route in something. And I was often made fun of it, like made up fun of it for it, made fun of for it when I was a kid because other people didn't understand it. But now it's just very much out there. And you have half the world that's learning more about it, and you have the other half that's just like, meh. But so I think it's a beautiful thing, and I can talk about it quite a lot. I think you've probably seen me go on rants about it before.
Possibly. um, and we just recently became friends on Instagram, and I did notice that your your name on Instagram is the another plump vegan.
Yes.
Um, so I didn't I was unaware, and maybe you're not, but I must ask, are you vegan?
Uh, Short answer, yes. Now, the way that I like to identify the diet and the lifestyle that I actually want to live is on the plant-based side of things. Um, but yes, when I had made the name Another Plump Vegan, I was plant-based, I was vegan, but now I was more on the vegan side, which we all know can be healthy or unhealthy. So I was very unhealthy.
Mm, okay. Yeah, because I've always contemplated becoming vegan, but I've heard two sides of the story when it comes to uh eating vegetables or plant-based um products exclusively.
Hmm.
Um uh how were you or how are you enjoying eating like plant-based foods in general, and what have you experienced as a result?
Well, I love it. And again, back to childhood, it was an easy transition for me because the first 8 years of my life, I was actually a vegetarian.
Hmm.
And there was a point where there was a stretch of years where I definitely ate everything. I experimented with food quite a lot, but I also had so many health problems. So the benefits that I saw when I decided to swap over completely in 2017 was that my migraines were gone. I stopped getting these insane, like, random outbreaks that I would get. Um, Body pain stopped. Uh, just a lot of other things with women. I don't experience that anymore. And if I do, it's probably because I just have a higher stress level that time, or I just didn't take care of what went into my body around that time. And so, I mean, the benefits are great. Anytime I go to the doctor, it's they're pretty impressed and they're shocked. And so, like, have another checkup coming up next month. Ask me again how good the vitals are.
I'm glad to hear that. I've never attempted to eat vegetables exclusively. I did indulge in a pescatarian diet for a time, and I did find myself uh I felt lighter. I didn't feel lethargic. Um and my weight did go down, but then unexpectedly when I turned 25, I developed an allergic reaction to seafood.
Oh,
So
wow.
yeah, I had to stop that. Um, but I have been intentionally eating more vegetables over the last 3 years, and I do internally sense a difference compared to like eating more meat.
Hmm.
I do feel more energized, um, and I think also when I eat vegetables consistently, I can sense that what's the word? I can internally sense the benefits of having like uh vegetables in my body, in my system. Because if I go a day after eating like vegetables for 2 weeks and eat like a hamburger, I feel it. And there's definitely a difference that I feel. Um,
Yeah.
and when I have that feeling, I feel conflicted because the hamburger tastes so good, but
Hmm.
then like internally, like the aftermath is like, ooh, this feels weird. It doesn't feel right. um, and so this is a challenge for me because a hamburger uh always seems like a good idea.
No, I completely get it. Like, transitioning, you remember where I was working when we met.
Hmm.
So I'm sitting here next to gourmet meats and gourmet pizzas with all this amazing cheese. And it it was definitely, you remember the taste of it, but the crazy thing is, after, so it was probably just months, if I'm being honest, that my taste buds completely changed. Because I remember, a few months in 2016, when I first tried to go the vegan route, I caved and I had a slice of cheese pizza, and all of a sudden I couldn't stand the texture of cheese. And so it turned into a texture thing for me. That's definitely what saved me, because I was like, I'll never try that again, and I never have. Um, and just one thing led to another. I mean, burgers. I mean, don't get me wrong. I saw my cousins cut open, or cut a rack of ribs, and the way they cooked it, I don't know if this is just the fact that I used to work in the food industry that amazed my soul, or what happened, but the way they cut it and it fell off the bone and it smelled so good and it looked so good, like, you guys knew what you were doing when you made that. And I was just like, man, if I still ate meat, I for sure would have, like, probably went back for seconds or even thirds in that case. Um, but it's not something that I look at and I have to fight the urge to stay away from, because I can actually just not touch it. It's not, I think I'm more grossed out at thinking about consuming it than admiring what a beautiful dish you just made.
Hmm. What I was gonna ask you. There so like I think a challenge for me when I decided to eat more vegetables or just have a being open to eating um plant-based products, which I am
Mhm,
open to
mhm.
trying. I think some people aren't open to even trying like a plant-based substitute
Yeah.
um because it may not taste good or simply for the fact that it's not meat.
Mhm.
Um, it was challenging for me to try new things. Um, but fortunately I did happen upon a a vegan sandwich shop in Berkeley,
Mhm.
California. It's called The Butcher's Son.
Yes.
And I was pleasantly surprised to experience the A1 steak
Right.
sandwich. It's funny to me that they still want to refer to it as steak, even though it's like some form of flour. Starts with an S. I forget the name of it.
Um, I don't know. I wouldn't know what it was, but I've been there a couple of times, so I definitely see how they can trick you. And I think they give these foods these names because they're trying to convert people. It's, you're trying to get people an easy transition. Now, when I see cauliflower wings on a menu, I'm not that intrigued. So, buffalo cauliflower, I don't even like cauliflower. And so, but if you were to say something else like, oh, we have these wings, I'm more than likely going to try to order it if you put buffalo wings or just whatever doesn't refer to a cauliflower and then put the little vegan symbol next to it. I'll be happy with that.
Yeah. And the reason why I'm mentioning the restaurant, it is relevant because I think maintaining a healthy diet can definitely contribute to increasing one's self growth. So yeah, I appreciate that aspect of our conversation. Um, what else do I want to ask you? Oh, so then there was another book that you had mentioned. Um, what was it called? The question behind the question.
The question behind the question, and I think I have it out here. But I do see it. Give me just a moment. So it's this one here by John G. Miller.
Hmm.
And so yeah, question away.
Okay. Well, I know that you gave a overview of what is entailing in terms of self accountability. But could you elaborate on it a little bit further?
On my own experiences with practicing personal accountability or just his book or
The
his
on his book.
I mean, so he kind of just goes in, he made a short version of it, and he gets straight to the point. He goes in and lets people know that if you can't hold yourself accountable for certain actions or just things in your life, how do you really expect to grow from that? And he uses lots of examples. I can't think of many at the top of my head right now because the last time I read this book was probably at the beginning of this year. But he just talks about like how if you're in a team and they point out an issue with your closing rates, say you're in sales and your closing rates are at a staggering, not even a staggering, they're just at a solid flat 30% and you want it to be at 60, um, and your response is you already missed like 2 weeks of work, you didn't come into work after your absence and say, where can I help, or what can I do to help this pick up? The first thing you did was, dang, I wasn't here. Like, you guys couldn't figure that out. Like, you guys were the ones that was here. So it's kind of like, too, you can kind of look at the fact that it's like, okay, well, I'm sorry that I wasn't here to help with this issue. Like, I'm here now. What can I do to help you guys out with that? And so he kind of points out those examples to where, versus passing blame or playing a victim in other situations, you kind of can look at the fact. Now, don't get him wrong, you're not always at fault for what happens, but you can acknowledge certain situations where you can just step up and be like, what can I do to change this? How do I get the opportunity to fix this? And as for holding the personal accountability, I mean, it's just, if you react a certain way in a situation, I'm pretty sure we've all had the moments that we've said something to somebody at the heat of the moment, or just because it was the first thing that came out of our mouths, and we think later, I probably should have said something different, or why did I jump straight to that solution? And
Mhm.
so he kind of just goes over like questions to really ask yourself, and how to get out of victim thinking. And it's his way of like making you more useful in society and in your personal life, as well as stopping you from being a procrastinator and a victim, and all of these things that we sometimes adopt into our lives because we think it's just the easier way to get out of a situation that makes us uncomfortable.
Mhm. That's interesting. What, if you could recall, what would be an example of a question that someone can ask themselves, that could help them to be more accountable?
One of my favorite ones is simple. It's just something that we've all asked ourselves at least once or twice, and it's what could I have done to avoid the situation? Is there anything I could have done to avoid the situation? So he throws off a series of questions that we do ask ourselves all the time, and we just really don't realize it because we're so stuck, like I said, in this uncomfortable mode, and we're sitting here just maybe internally panicking or doing whatever we're doing, but not helping the case. So one of my favorite ones is just simple, like, what could I have done differently? Versus, why did I even say that? I should have, done A and B. So yeah, that's one of the ones that I can remember the most of, because that's the one that stuck with me the most. And so usually before I act on things that I'm not certain of, I definitely take a second to think, like, is this the best thing that I can do? And if not, what could I do that would give me a better solution than what I'm hoping for?
Mm, okay. Yeah, I think it's challenging for me sometimes to think 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 before acting,
Mhm.
which I don't think is a bad thing, because sometimes uh we don't have time to
True.
to think. It's like, I need a decision to make. But I mean, we do have time to participate or not. But I think sometimes our intuition can be our saving grace.
Mhm.
Um, but I do think questioning is a value in life, um, because I think sometimes I was talking in an earlier podcast about the various parenting styles, and if a child is brought up in a household that's authoritarian, authoritarian parent, an authoritarian parent uh, tends to not tolerate a child asking a question when given a
Mhm.
direction by the parent. Um, do you think people who tend to live with a victimhood mindset possibly are that way because maybe they aren't courageous enough to ask questions.
Sometimes I definitely have seen people grow up in those situations. And later on, for example, I actually just had a conversation about this with somebody either yesterday or the day before, how you can raise two people in a household just like that. And they each handle it completely different. You'll treat them exactly the same on a daily basis. And as those years go by, they each react a different way. Like you might have one who knows they have an insecurity and they know they have that trauma and they know they have that problem and they do everything they can to get out of that. And then you'll have the other one who wants to stay victimized, and it turns into anger, it turns into resentment, and then they have this attitude and this whole demeanor that a lot of people find it hard to be around, or they either have friends who just pity them. And so I do think, yes, it is, some people have that attitude and that mentality because of how they grew up with those parents. Not everyone can break free from that.
Mhm. In terms of victimhood, I read a book called The Big Leap, which I've mentioned in other episodes, and it talks about the upper limit problem, and it also talks about victimhood, or they use the phrase jockeying for victimhood, and
Um,
they talk about historical events, especially revolving two religious groups who may live in close proximity to one another, and
right.
how there's long lasting conflicts over generations. And the
Mm,
reason why that happens is because each group is trying to jockey for victimhood. They want to be the one who is the victim of the next group, and they want to be the ones who places the blame on the other group.
all right.
But the book says when it comes to accountability, um, there is both. If we're talking about two groups, each group cannot say I take 50% of accountability in a situation when there's a conflict. Each group has to say I take 100% accountability for my participation in the conflict, and that way there will be a resolve. Like I participated in being angry, committing acts of violence towards the next person. Therefore, if um, a conversation arises, then there shouldn't be no more conflict, because if I participated, you know, I I'm accountable. But I
Hmm.
think historically and alternatively, um, the strategy to deal with victimhood and blaming, it tends to be conventionally a 50-50. It has to be people choose to want to take 50% of the blame, and then the other 50%, um it just like stays in limbo, I guess, if we're talking about from an individual context. um does that make sense to you?
It does. I mean, that's interesting. And that book was called The Big Leap.
Yes, it's called The Big Leap by Gay Kendricks.
want to check that one out. Yeah, so I mean, that kind of ties into something that we were discussing earlier, where you can't just really, you know, oh, the story. You can't just assume everyone is the same. Now that whole thing where nobody wants to take the full blame, but they possibly should. Um, I think that's a tricky scenario, because a lot of, especially when it comes to religion,
Mhm,
religion disagreements started before we were even here,
mhm,
and they were in on this earth for years, thousands of years.
mhm,
And it's like, the only thing that we can be blamed for now is that were we were taught our version of what happened with our religion
mhm,
and whoever we're feuding with, and then we still carried on those actions and that behavior. And so I think people just need to either agree to disagree, and just everyone go live how they're happy living,
mhm,
or I just think it just all needs to stop. It's somewhat ridiculous, because religion's a sticky topic in general, but as for nobody wanting to own up to it, everybody wants to be the victim to it. Like, oh, you guys did this to us, so we're entitled to do this and say this. I don't agree with any of that. And that's probably why I was kicked out of churches growing up. Who knows? But yeah. So, I mean, that's another sticky situation, and I get a little not nervous, but I don't want to offend a person while going on about it, unless I actually have time to sit there and like dig into my points
mm,
on why I say just agree to disagree in certain situations, and that is one of them.
okay. I recently read an article um, based around the country of Kosovo. Kosovo, I think historically was a part of Serbia,
Mm-hmm.
and for a long period of time, um, Serbians occupied most of Kosovo. But then
Mm-hmm.
there was, I think, a conflict that happened in Albania, which is a neighboring country from Kosovo, and as a result, there were refugees who fled Albania and resided in Kosovo amongst Serbians. Um, there was at a certain point, one of the presidents during, I think, the 80s, 1980s, who was
Mm-hmm.
Serbian, supposedly committed acts of violence and crime against the refugees of Albania, and there was like years of conflict among Serbians and Albanians who lived in Kosovo, and now there is there's somewhat peace in Kosovo, but there's still unrest in terms of like relationships amongst Serbians and Albanians in Kosovo. Um, the the Albanians who are currently living in Kosovo are, from what I read, demanding an apology from the Serbians who are living in Kosovo,
Mm-hmm.
and the apology, I think, is applying to um all Serbians, and well, I misspoke. The apology applies to Serbians who are young and old that live in Kosovo amongst the Albanians. The the Serbians take issue with that because they're saying, if I was not involved in the crimes against your families, why should I then apologize for things that have happened in the past? And I think that that type of demand exemplifies um an expectation and a prolonging of like the struggle in that country. Because if I wasn't involved, why should I apologize? And I think that demonstrates like wanting to maintain victimhood and placing blame.
Right.
um do you agree with that?
So as you were like describing that to me, I look at it like, why should you? You shouldn't have to apologize for someone else's actions. You never should. Now, when you, like I did state earlier, when you're carrying on those same behaviors, yeah, you
Hmm.
kind of do owe an apology to a certain extent. Now, you didn't start it, but you're keeping it going.
Hmm.
And for example, if somebody that I'm close to in my life caused somebody pain, and I'm pretty sure that I actually have done this, and they just have all this pride and they refuse to say sorry. I have it in my heart to be like, hey, like, I'm sorry for what this person did to hurt you, or just whatever they did that made you feel how you're feeling today. Now, you're probably never going to get an apology from that person, but at least somebody heard your
Hmm.
side of the story, and they were able to, if not relate, they were still able to acknowledge that if you've been affected in a negative way, and they want to do something that can make it right, because that could actually change a lot. Is like, you guys can simply just come out and be like, hey, it wasn't us, but we do apologize for what happened to you. And
Hmm.
so, kind of, I think it just takes a person that can acknowledge pain and discomfort to just
Hmm.
step up and do that. But if nobody wants to, I mean, I get it. You don't want to. I think maybe they feel like apologizing is going to label them the bad guy.
Mm.
I
Yeah,
mean,
that's possible. And I think maybe too, by apologizing for something that you didn't do, that could possibly actually stifle your awareness of being accountable for yourself.
mhm,
Because if I'm being accountable for myself, I'm not going to go overextend myself um by doing things that um are displeasing to me to
right.
please the next person. And I think I think that's where the struggle occurs, when people only want to take 50% of accountability. Um, so yeah, it's interesting in terms of like self accountability.
And most
Uh,
definitely.
and so where are we? Okay. So now I want to move on to our fairly new phase or aspect of our podcast, which I title Interpreting Expression.
Mhm.
To describe what that is for people unfamiliar, I will read a quote or a sentence to the featured guest, and they have an opportunity to interpret um, the the statement, which
Mhm.
is a form of expression. And I will also share my perspective on the statement, or it could be a question, so that we can hopefully make it relatable, not only to ourselves, but to other people who are listening. Today's interpreting expression quote is, the fruit of self-growth is self-understanding. Dezi, how would you interpret that quote?
Yes. That's just like, and the reason I simply just say yes is because if you cannot acknowledge what's going on inside of yourself, like it's like when you go to AA because you know you have, or just any rehab because you know you have a problem of some sort, there's no way you're gonna get over that addiction if you can't acknowledge the problem. They tell you that in AA, the first step to recovery is acknowledging you have a problem. So I think that kind of ties into that. Once you acknowledge what's within you, understanding what's in you, then that's when that self growth begins.
Mm. I read something. I read a statement that someone was had posted on the internet, and it said, the first step to personal growth is self-awareness.
Mhm.
And they used the example of um, being able to uh, speak up in times of need, and by doing so, you'll actually be able to better connect to your emotional side as well.
Mhm.
I can relate to that because I think, um, if we choose to avoid being vocal about things that concern us or um, is relatable to us, to someone else,
Mhm.
um, I think the reflection of us saying what we need to say, um, will be non-existent. When I say reflection, I'm just saying more so the reaction that may come as a result of us saying what we need to say in the moment to someone else. Um, I know I I'm thankful that I'm not um a shy person. There has been times when I mean, in general, I'm not a shy person, but there have been times when I didn't speak when I could have spoke. Um, Specifically in times when I was younger,
Mhm.
being around maybe a beautiful, attractive woman, being shy, feeling intimidated, and not just simply expressing myself, you know. And I think when I chose to avoid that, um, when I'm when I'm at home by myself, I start temptations of self-doubt, um, self-defeat start to like creep in my head, because ultimately, I'm trying to figure out, like, you know, why did I I'm questioning myself. Why didn't I speak up when I should have spoke up?
Yeah.
Like, I'm being afraid. Um, you care to elaborate on what I said or share your perspective on what I said?
No, I mean, I can definitely understand those feelings coming from somebody who lived a silent life for a very long time. So I can relate to a lot of what you just said.
Mm. I so I've been exercising. I'm more of an outdoorsy exerciser versus being in the gym, and I like to do power walking. Where I live, there's a trail that allows me to walk for uh, like 5 miles back and forth. And a lot of people inhabit like the trail, be it riding bikes or walking. And sometimes when I'm walking, um, if someone is walking on the trail and they're going the opposite direction, there have been times when I give eye contact to the person, but they seem to be intentionally avoiding like giving me eye contact for whatever reason. Um, I think sometimes people avoid don't give eye contact because they don't want to have an interaction with the person that's like in their vicinity.
Yeah.
Um, the reason why I say that is due to personal experience. There's been times when um, I say hello to someone who's not giving me eye contact, and the result is they end up not saying anything at all and continue not looking in my direction.
Yeah. Those are my favorites.
So those, as someone who's sociable and extroverted, those type of interactions are challenging for me, um, because I start to question like I have questioned myself, like, should I have said anything at all to them? Or I tell myself I have told myself I shouldn't have said anything at all to them, if they're gonna like behave that way.
Right.
But recently, I had a change of heart, because there were times when if a person wasn't giving me eye contact, I would just not say anything at all because I'm assuming like if you're not giving me eye contact, you don't want to talk to me. And I'm at a point where when it comes to the present moment, I try not to have presumptions of what's happening in the present moment, but more so just um, act off of my intuition, and in hopes that what I do will uh, be of benefit. So like recently, when people have been walking by me and they don't give me eye contact, I decided that I'm just going to say hello, and if they don't give me a response, um, just be okay with that. And the reason why I'm okay with it now is because I feel like in that moment I've done my part. I feel like
Exactly.
I feel like me talking or interacting, that's like the adult thing to do, the mature thing to do. And if they choose not to respond to me, um like I feel like I'm okay with it. And I think those moments when they're not talking to me, like I'm not at a loss, as I used to think. Like I I used to think like I wasted my time by trying to talk to these people who aren't trying
Mhm.
to like be reciprocating. But I think um now there's like subtle things that I'm starting to realize. It's like, oh, them not talking to me helps me to like build more compassion towards people who are like that.
Mhm.
Once it's said and done and they choose not to say anything.
Right.
Um, and I think that's tying back into like um the quote, um the fruit of self growth is self understanding, and
Mhm.
in me like having awareness like, oh, um people are different. There's people who will say hello to me, people who give me eye contact, and I just got to be, like you say, adaptive and understand like life is a journey and it's going to continue on regardless if people are interactive with me or not. But you said something. You said people who don't talk back to you. Those are your favorite type of people. Why is that?
That was sarcasm. I mean, honestly, I that was definitely sarcasm, but no, I mean, it used to bother me, I want to say, when people wouldn't say anything back to me. But now I'm just more like, okay, like, hope you have a better day tomorrow. Like, so it doesn't bother me anymore because again, you can't control another person's actions towards you. The only thing we have control of is how we react to it. Are we going to let that random person take our whole day down? I hope not.
Hmm.
And so, yeah, I'm glad that you had that realization in yourself because you're a very rare find when it comes to personalities. You're very kind. And y- and it's true. Like, I always told you that. I'm like, you're very kind. And when I can say hi to a lot of people. Like, I've just been in random places and people automatically just don't like me from the sight of me.
Mm,
Um, and that's just been something ongoing my whole life. People before even shaking my hand or like getting introduced to me, they already decide they don't like me.
mm,
And so I've had years of practice of saying hi and then people turning the other way or just like smirking or doing something. And I think that's why now it's just like, I'm going to continue to be myself. If I
mhm,
want to say hi to you, I'm going to say hi to you. Like, why not? So I don't really, if I don't have a reason not to, then, and I
mhm.
just, if it's in my soul to say hello, like, expect a hello. And so I think the whole point I was going to is that you being so kind, a lot of people aren't used to kindness. And so I think they're suspicious of it, or maybe you just catch them off guard and they think about it later on.
Mm. I appreciate those theories, because as someone who initiates a interaction with somebody and experiences no reciprocation, it's tempting to go down a spiral of many different theories, especially in the moment right after they walk by and are being passive aggressive, which I think that is an act of when you choose not to like
Right.
reciprocate an interaction. Yeah, it's tempting to just like be in my head and try to like think about why this person didn't do it versus being present and not being distracted. It's really challenging. And if you want to take it to the next level, it seems even more challenging when you have to uh encounter an individual like that on a daily basis, like
Retail.
at work.
Yeah, I'm like retail, that customer service life. I had to leave it because of those reasons. Well, that was part of it. But and it does take a negative effect on people. It can weigh you down because it's a whole different breed of humans that go into public places now and decide to take their problems out on the person that's there to help them and serve them. And even in general, like, if you're just somebody that's nice and you're in a grocery store trying to find a certain type of juice or something, and you're like, hi, like, could I like possibly get here, like, and you might have a person that's like, oh yeah, I'm so sorry, like, how's your day going, blah blah blah. And then you might have that one person that's pissed off that you just asked them, like, if you can just reach in and grab this thing because they've been standing there for 16 minutes texting or looking on Instagram to put it on their live that they're going to pick a juice that's on sale. So it's like yeah, um bless the hearts of all people that have to be face to face with this on a daily basis, at work, especially when you're there because you have to make a living like everyone else. So it, I just had like a whole whirlwind of memories.
Oh, that's funny. And referring back to what you had said earlier when in terms of like sometimes not recognizing when like you are like bettering yourself. I do think like it seems like often when you're initiating things, the result of those actions, you may not actually recognize the growth. It's more of I'm doing it not to grow, but more I'm just doing it because it feels right. Would you agree
Right.
with that?
Yeah, most definitely. And there's nothing like, how could you not? If something feels right in you and you're not causing any harm, like how could you not make that action or do that one thing? Especially knowing that sometimes that one person that does respond, you probably just made their freaking week because they don't have thoughtful people just thinking to ask them how's their day going or to say good morning. You know,
Mm-hmm.
my morning walks, I used to be like terrified when people would like speak to me. I don't like, I'm like, why are you talking? But I started to appreciate it. I started to do the same thing. And um it makes a difference. Like just knowing, oh, such a sweet little lady. She thought of saying good morning to me, like for no reason. And just knowing that you have people out there that want to spread kindness, it's makes it still like reinstills my hope and my faith in this life because it's exhausting to have to take on other people's problems, whether they realize they're throwing those problems onto you or not.
Mm-hmm.
It's exhausting. And that is exactly why, like you said, when you said that at work part, I was just like, yes, but here we are.
Yeah, and going back to what you were saying, have experiencing that one person who does reciprocate,
Hmm.
it is quite pleasurable to experience that after attempting to uh engage with somebody with like 15 other individuals prior to that one person who does reciprocate and say hello to me after after I say hello.
Hmm.
It's quite gratifying.
Like, I did it. Most
um
definitely.
yeah. So now we're going to transition to a new not a new but a different aspect, and the final aspect of the Journey of Self Growth podcast, which is based around the 9 multiple intelligence theory.
Okay.
I'm going to share my screen so others can um, become aware of what I'm referring to.
Hmm.
Can you see that?
Yes.
Okay, cool. So this is the 9 multiple intelligence theory chart. Hold on, really quick. Let's see. This is supposed to be down here. Okay. Okay, cool. This is the 9 multiple intelligence theory chart. And this is based around a theory that we as individuals have more than one, sorry, more than 3 forms of intelligences, which is the conventional theory that's adopted by the masses. This theory suggests that we have 9, and through practice and repetition, we can increase each one of these intelligences. Um, so, Dezi,
Hmm.
Um, of the 9 multiple intelligence theories, which, if any, would you have high degrees in, and what methods and strategies do you attribute to increasing these?
Well, I think my higher degrees would be probably in the interpersonal aspect. I've always, or at a, most of my life, for as far back as I can remember, is I've always been, I guess you can say, I've been described as intuitive. I've been described as empathetic. And I've just been a pretty decent judge of character. I've been able to share a few words with a person, or even just like observe actions in our first meeting or even our second meeting, and I've been able to read people quite, not easily, but I've been able to read people better than my family and friends have, to the point where 9-year-old me was being asked about, like, what do I think certain people's intentions are, and yeah, by adults. And so it's just something that I think I did excel at pretty early. I don't know how I was blessed with that gift, but I was. And I mean, I'll run with it because I think it's helped me avoid a lot of situations. And whereas one thing that the intrapersonal, I think over the last year specifically, I have been very good at understanding myself and being really able to marinate in my feelings and acknowledge what I want. Um, so I think those two, I have high degrees there.
Mm. And for those interested in enhancing these two, uh, what would you suggest they implement to get where you are?
I mean, back to our good old friend solitude.
Mm.
If you're able to spend some time, whether it's on your ride home when you're driving home from work, or if you're just somebody who can't really have privacy, I mean, take a super long shower if you can, because just being by yourself and in your thoughts, no music, nothing, just there, you're forced to enjoy your own company. If you don't enjoy yourself, um, or if you can't find peace with yourself, then you're probably not going to find it anywhere. So I would say just find a way to be alone, and find a way to do it silently. And I think that's a good first start.
Mm. And when you say being alone, does that necessarily have to be like sitting in a room doing, like, being inactive, or could you be participating in activities while alone?
Yeah, I mean, if you're somebody who like wants to sit there and doodle or play like some kind of a card game, it's great. You're sitting there and you're making your brain work. Um, Sorry about that. Give me a second. You can definitely do something. I would think some people do need that because it's a part of calming your brain down versus letting it race around. So,
Mm, I like that. I can relate to that.
mhm.
And then the second question is which which of the 9 intelligences would you have low degrees of intellect, and and if which ones do you have low degrees of intellect, and do you desire to increase them, If so, why?
I was looking at that earlier when you sent me the list, and the one that I feel like I oddly, after this whole conversation we've had, that I feel I want to work on is the linguistic category.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just because there are a lot of times where I have so many thoughts going through me. I have so many emotions at one time that I can't necessarily pinpoint um, how to express what I'm saying. Not everybody understands me
Mm-hmm.
because I mean, I do probably either come on stronger when I am open, and sometimes being direct, people can mistake it for something other than what it is. So I think that's something I would want to improve on, is being able to just go straight into a feeling. And if you're wanting to know what I'm feeling, I want to be able to like run that down to you without having to sit there and say, give me a minute so I can put my words together.
Mm-hmm.
So that
Yeah.
was my only one. I mean, being a naturalist, I think I'm on my way there. So I think I'm pretty cool.
Okay. And in terms of naturalist, what are you doing to increase your intellect?
I've definitely started to surround myself with more nature, whether it's just being outdoors, whether it's working on growing plants, whether if I spent a lot of time in Oregon lately, just being along the coast where I do get to be in nature. I've learned a few things out there so far. One of them being more of just producing your own food and just mm, plants that I have at the house.
Mm-hmm.
I've surrounded myself with more plants, and have after I killed plenty of them in the beginning of my plant journey, I have managed to have some pretty good ones that are kicking in and growing tall. I have one that's probably up to my waist right now, and when I first got him, he was like a good foot shorter.
What type of plant would that be?
I can't pronounce the actual name, but it's the one that is also called the elephant's ear.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow. How many plants do you estimate you have total?
Um, in this apartment, about 9.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's plenty.
I have space for at least 3 more.
Will you be getting more?
It depends. I only buy them when I come across that one plant that I have to have. It's like I connect with the plant, and so connect with it, and then I'm just like, you're coming with me.
That's funny. I actually have it's a variation of a bonsai plant tree,
Mhm.
and I enjoy it because it's a little mini tree, and I imagine that it reflects me internally somehow. But my relationship with it is fairly new, but I do enjoy like watering it, seeing it grow. Um I I rotate it in my and turn it towards the sun um every day. So it's just the process of like being um like sort of like a parent to the plant gives me like some internal fulfillment and satisfaction, being responsible for watering it, and it being like a part of my journey. It's interesting. For me, in terms of I've spoken about the one the of the 9, which ones I feel like I have high degrees of intelligence and which ones that are lower in previous podcasts. But what I haven't spoke about in any other podcasts in terms of the ones that I feel like I have heightened intelligence is the methods and strategies that I apply to enhancing these intellects. So I won't go over all of them in this podcast, but I think the ones that I'll focus on tonight is my interpersonal intelligence,
Mm,
which paraphrases, which to describe that, it says sensing people's feelings and motives.
mhm,
Um, I think for me to increase that intellect, it takes a willingness to initiate interactions with people in order for me to elevate that intellect, um, because um, it seems oftentimes people people don't engage with me. So I think, I don't know if this is a cultural thing, but I just think at least in the Bay Area, people quote unquote tend to mind their own business, as they would say.
mhm,
But I think sometimes not connecting with someone may be detrimental, because the person that you could be interacting with could provide you with some resourceful information that could help you along your journey. And so um I think that's what excites me when I choose to interact and engage with people, especially people I've never met before, strangers.
mhm,
um how they react, it varies, but it I definitely feel like I grow as an individual, just based on the subtle things that a person may say or do as a result of me starting to have a conversation with them.
mhm.
Um, then oh, I see what you're saying. I just saw your message. Okay. Um, and lastly, um, musically, I enhance my intellect, and it could be both linguistic and musical. I enjoy writing music, and I
Mhm.
intentionally, when I write lyrics, I try not to be repetitive with using similar words.
Right.
Um, and that helps me to like just be so motivated to like learn new words to avoid being repetitive and monotonous. So these are, I encourage people to read a new, like, discover a new word, read a dictionary if you have a chance. It will definitely help you to increase your linguistic. And if you enjoy writing music, it will help you in that as well.
Yeah.
Um so this concludes this aspect of the Journey of Self Growth podcast. We are we have reached the end. I appreciate everyone who was listening. I appreciate my friend Dezi for being a
Mm.
part of the podcast and journey. Um, what what would be your parting words?
Oh, my parting words would just be I hope everyone who is trying to find themselves and just go through their own self growth journey, I hope you all make it. And I hope you all just don't give up, because you might wake up one day and it'll be right there and you'll recognize the new you and you'll keep going forward. And also good night, because it's like 9:30. So those are my parting words.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Um, so this ends the Journey of Self Growth, episode 8. I hope you all will enjoy the rest of the evening. Um, Good night.
Good night.